When you see stories of crime committed on the news, especially crime committed by young people, do you ever consider why they might have found themselves in a situation where vandalism, drug dealing, theft, or violence became the best idea they could think of in that moment? And when it comes to the consequences of that crime, have you ever thought about what role punishment plays in the likelihood of that person committing further crime? My guest today has a remarkable perspective on these two questions. Recently released from years in prison after a horrific accident while drunk driving, Zac Jones is an extraordinary man. And what he has to say about our approach to criminalising trauma responses in young people, criminalising addiction, and how the prisons we send people to are closer to, I guess, a criminal TAFE than a place that helps people recover, reform and rehabilitate. I guess some of it might be pretty challenging to hear, but hey, life's too short to not have these kind of conversations. So let me tell you about my guest today. Prisons are full of people who made a really, really stupid decision on what was probably the worst day during the worst week and the worst year of their lives. A split-second choice that changed the course of their lives and likely left other lives destroyed or in tatters. Have you ever wondered what the rest of your life is like after making a choice like that? From the outside, at what point would you feel that the perpetrator has paid their debt, changed their ways, and is now free to safely rejoin and contribute to society? Date your daughter, marry your mum. Months, years, decades? How long would you need to feel that you could accept another person as free and clear of the weight of their crime? From the other side, despite months, years, or decades between you and the crime and the jail time, could you ever feel that you're accepted again by society? To compound this, what if the crime happens when you are young? Zac Jones is my guest today. He was 21 years old when he drove a car with 4 people in it while under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He ran a red light, the car went airborne, crashed into the front wall of a nursing home and burst into flames. Zac went to jail. The story of how he ended up at the point where he chose to get behind the wheel that night, what happened after the crash, what happened in prison, and what his life is like now he's out of prison it's eye-opening, to say the least. Because Zac's story forces us to see the facts around the vast majority of crime in our country, especially crimes committed by young people. Zac's story is an example of how criminal behaviour in young people is often more likely to be a response to trauma than anything else. And by criminalising trauma and neglect instead of treating it, whether we like it or not, we set up a self-perpetuating negative cycle of traumatic incarceration, reoffending, and further incarceration. It just goes on and on and on. The human cost, the cost to us as a country, the broken people, broken families, absent parents, it's absolutely devastating. And more than half of the time, it's futile. In Australia, 53% of all people released from prison will return to prison within 2 years. And that should tell you pretty much everything about how well our system of rehabilitation around criminal behaviour is working out for us. There's a lot to talk about with Zac, so this first part is a goodie, and I'm going to give you a week to have a think about it, and then we're going to get into the next part. There's some pretty graphic descriptions in this conversation of drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, road trauma, and self-harm, but we left it all in there because it is in context and it's important to hear. Zac and his mother Jane have co-authored a book with their story. Why the Fallen is out now. You can get it at whythefallen.com. Enjoy part 1 of this conversation with Zac Jones.
Dude, I'm just going to say before we start, man, my mind is actually blowing right now because I don't know if I told you, but when I was in jail, I got a Men's Health magazine and you were on the front cover. Shirtless and ripped.
Holy shit. Oh, well, we're going to have to put this in the show.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, there's a long story about that, but we'll get there. Yeah. We will get there. Zac, it's great to see you, Zac. Where in the world are you today, mate?
I'm at my house in Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Victoria.
I've heard of this city. It's the cultural hub of our country, apparently.
Yeah,
And
something like that.
They play a game there with too many people on the field and too many goalposts. I don't understand it. It's a lot of running around. It's like it constantly looks like two games of handball fighting over the same tennis ball at Little Lunch. That's what AFL looks like to me. When I watch it, I'm like, just like giant people running around trying to chase a ball that doesn't bounce properly. And that's what it looks like. Pass it to me. Get it away from them. School bell, go back inside. That's what AFL has always looked like to me.
And it's everything down here. Like, these banners are actually covering up a bunch of Richmond memorabilia. So, I just wanted to avoid the politics for this podcast.
Oh, mate, this podcast is nothing but politics. Shit, man. Like, life is politics. Everything is politics. But no, it's wonderful that we're speaking today. I'm really grateful you reached out so we could have a chat, because it's it's important to have these kind of conversations, especially. Well, it's always important to have these kind of conversations. And I'm a parent of a 18-and-a-half-year-old. She's my stepdaughter, and anyone that's got a kid who's 16 and a half, at least in New South Wales, when it can happen, the moment they get their L's, and then 6 months later, the moment they get their P's, you're fucking terrified. You give them the keys and say, off you pop. But it never stops. She's, every time she goes driving, I mean, still now, she's an amazing driver, but still, it's fucking scary. So your story is really important for people to hear, and particularly the perspective at which you go, and where your story takes us. I don't know, man. You've got a lot to talk about today, but it's probably important that we kind of start at the start. When are you from a big family, Zac?
No, I'm an only child.
Right.
Yeah. Only child.
Yeah. You don't know anything else, but when you looked at other kids that had siblings, was there anything that you kind of were grateful for, or anything that you wish you had?
Look, growing up for me, definitely, I always wished I had a brother. So my biological father isn't in the picture. I was adopted when I was 3, and that man who I consider my dad and my mum got married, and he has a son as well. So I kind of got a half brother, but he lived in England.
Yeah, right.
And so I never really got to see him.
Yeah.
So I remember growing up always feeling alone and hated not having people my age around me, or like a sibling. That was something that always did kind of bother me.
One of my best mates in the world is adopted, and I knew him. They had just changed the laws in Queensland. While I knew him, he was 22 when they changed the laws that you could go and, once you're 18, you can go and do your own investigations and go and find people. And the day they changed the laws, he went and found them. And I'm wondering, what was that journey like for you?
So, I mean, my mum was always really open with me about my biological father. She'd show me photos of him, and she did have his contact information. So, there were a few times growing up where, we'd call him, and, there was even one occasion Mum flew me overseas to go and meet him.
Wow. And,
I learned that I had a half sister on his side. Yeah. And when I saw him, he was, all affection and love, and, I've missed you so much, I love you, and over the span of 3 days, he really did kind of convince me that he was going to be a part of my life going forward, and that I was going to have like a little half sister. And so when I got back to Australia and normal life progressed, and then I didn't hear from him again, and, I would actually write letters to my half sister, and he wouldn't give them to her. She never got one of them.
Fucking fuck.
So, and that deeply cut me. You know what I mean?
I'm so sorry that happened to you, man. That's really hard. I'm really sorry that experience was like that for you. But I'm sure that your mum and your adoptive family, there's nothing but love. I mean, to adopt a kid, that's nothing. There's so much love to give.
As we'll get into, my number one fan, my number one supporter is my mum. She has had my back through thick and thin.
Yeah.
I was an absolute terror growing up, as we'll get into, and yeah, she's always been there.
So what do you mean terror? What were you like at the age of 7 taking notes home from school saying, Zac did this, or, when did terror start?
So look, in my book, I refer to myself as a toddling tornado because I was hectic from the day I came out. So, I mean, really, even my birth, my mum was in labour for like 48 hours.
Right.
I was breech posterior. I had my umbilical cord wrapped around my throat. Like I came out into this world a problem.
Right.
Um,
God.
but, and then it was just downhill from there, really. So, but yeah, look, I was a terror. I actually locked my babysitter in my bedroom once when I was really young.
Wow.
Yeah, and then so yeah, throughout school I was disruptive, did not play well with others,
Yeah.
class clown, and eventually it just progressed, and then through my teenage years is where it got serious and it got really bad. Yeah.
I mean, there's. I'm sure that people are listening have similarities, whether it was them or they knew someone who was that person. We all knew that person. There were elements of what you just described that were definitely me, and elements of what you described I found around about the age of 14, 15. I found, all those things just don't bother me so much when I'm drinking or smoking weed. But at 14 and 15, that stuff was kind of hard to come by. And I'm wondering about what time did substances start to show up in your life, Zac?
Look, I mean, definitely in terms of alcohol, I started stealing alcohol from like, my parents and stuff like that when I was really like 12 or 13.
Right.
Smoking cigarettes at the same stage. But at that stage, I really was looking for an escape.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but I formed this ideology and it was something that I worked on through counseling, that I developed this association between drugs and alcohol, substances, and fun, unwinding, escape. And so, I was dealing with things at school like bullying. I was dealing with the breakdown of my parents' marriage and a lot of different things. And so I was looking to try and avoid facing those things. And so I actively sought out drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And I actively sought out substances to help me get through that.
I don't think you're alone in that. I mean, I'm old enough that when I was young, like young, like 10, my cricketing heroes were on television having the best time, partying, enjoying the camaraderie of their friends, and there was heaps of beer and, rugby league as well, So that association, it's not a stretch. I mean, that was what was marketed as if you drink, Alan Border and his friends are going to invite you on a fishing trip and it's going to be awesome. Or, you and the Manly Sea Eagles, I don't know what they were called back then, you're going to have an amazing time and Cliffy Lyons is going to cheers you after a game. It's going to be brilliant. And so it wasn't a stretch to think, when I crack a beer, this is what I'm drinking.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, but that never ended up showing up. No matter how much I drank, it never happened.
Look, I tell you, I pushed it to the absolute limit.
Yeah.
And I say this in my presentations a lot, that no amount of drugs or alcohol is ever going to make you happy or ever fix your problems.
Yeah.
I've tried very fucking hard.
Yeah, mate, I've done a lot of field work in that area. I'm the large hater on Collider. I'm like, no, we'll just make it go faster and we'll find the answer. Like, no, it didn't happen. But they never said that in the ads. But, we all had a moment, We all had a moment when that amount of behavior and that amount of substances eventually brought a stop. And it's weird, I talk to people about it, and I don't know if you can relate to this, that there's people who can drink and people who might be able to recreationally use, but, they do it to a point where their ability to self-regulate or the values they have in the rest of their life are enough to go, oh, it's okay, I could not do that and be okay. And then, it happened with me, and it certainly happened with people I've been close to. You pass the last exit with the sign that says the bridge is out up ahead, and now you can't get off the road, and you just keep, it doesn't matter how slow you go, eventually you'll get there, and eventually you've passed this point where you can no longer be in control of it. Do you remember that point?
Absolutely. I think from a very young age, again, we're talking like 13, 14, and it only progressively got worse. For me, one drink was always too many and 100 wasn't enough.
It's a classic,
you know.
isn't it? It's a
And
classic.
I had that mentality that every time I put a bottle to my lips or every time I smoked weed or did drugs, it wasn't just a matter of, feeling some of the effects. It was pushing it as far as I could.
Yeah.
And every bad, dumb decision I've ever made, I can trace back to my predominantly alcohol. I don't touch alcohol anymore, and I'm really happy to say that because I am a problem drinker. You know what I mean? And the ability to recognize that and accept that has changed my life forever.
It is a tough one, isn't it? Because for so long, I don't know if it's our society or our own egos, we want to be able to say it was something else. Oh, I don't know, it was, they didn't give me the job, or that person was a dick to me at work, or that person doesn't want to go out with me anymore, or that person did whatever, that cut me off in traffic. They're the reason that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Once we realize that, we have chosen not only our reaction to that situation, but also that reaction involves, trying to avoid the uncomfortable feeling of that situation by whether it be gambling or shopping or porn or alcohol or drugs. That's our choice. I tell people, like I'm allergic to alcohol. When I drink, I break out and fuckwit. It's wild when you do that. It's hard the first time you do that reverse engineering, isn't it? And you go, okay, well, let me think about what happened when I was, that friend of mine that I knew for years and I no longer talk to. What was let's go back, the things we said to each other, what started we were drinking. Oh, what about that time that I was going at that person and they never called me back again? I was drinking. Like when you start to find out the root cause of it and you realize it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, for me, unfortunately, it was always more criminal related for me. I was constantly in trouble with the police. Oh, why did I wake up in the cop shop? Alcohol. Why did I smash that shop front? Alcohol. And just I was incredibly troubled. Like it was never just, getting kicked out of a club for me. It was a fight. It was never just, being too messy walking down the street. It was, I was vandalizing something, so it was a real problem for me.
So waking up out of a blackout in the police station, not knowing how you got there.
Yeah.
What I have heard of someone, I've heard of somebody telling this story, but what's the first thing they tell you, and do you believe them when they say what you've done?
I mean, so this one example, I woke up in Balaclava police station, which is right next to St Kilda, and so St Kilda is the beachfront. I was drinking with this Irish backpacker, this girl. We were having a great night. Last thing I remember is trying to climb a palm tree, and when I woke up, I was covered in cuts and scratches. But so I woke up in this dirty kind of police station, and they told me that I walked across the middle of the road and was yelling at a police car, and so they stopped me, and then I just became belligerent, and they had to lock me up, like really for my own good. So
that's a busy road to be walking along in that state.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was incredibly embarrassing.
How old were you?
At that time I was 18.
God damn. And I'm guessing at this point, it's not you. It's not the drinking, is it?
Oh yeah, it's not my fault. It was just, it was the police just picking on me. At that time, that was my mentality, and I had all these cuts and scratches on me, and that's not because I was trying to climb a palm tree and be a dickhead. That was because of the cops. So it was everyone else's fault.
And when you loop back in with your mates and you're showing them the scars and you're telling them the stories, you're kind of lionizing yourself in the retelling, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll gift you a beer, like that. And it just kind of goes around again, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's full
that
on.
Inability to actually admit that you're the fucking problem. You know what I mean?
Were you still living at home at this point?
No. So I was. I mean, look, throughout my teenage years, my parents couldn't keep me at home. I would always run away. I would couch surf. there were even times that I slept hard,
Mm.
and that was really through my own choice because my parents had this rule that there's no drugs in the house, and I just wasn't willing to play by that rule from the age of 15 onwards.
God damn.
But yeah, when I was 16, 17, I started boarding with a lady in Ringwood, this like derelict house. She had like 9 cats, so you can imagine the smell. But she smoked weed, and so I lived with her, paid $100 a week rent, and just lived there and smoked weed. And I moved back in and out of my parents' house because every time I would just absolutely fuck my life up. Whether it was get myself jumped and I had my jaw fractured, or I'd been expelled or kicked out or whatever, I'd always go back to my parents. But eventually I kind of started getting my life on track. I stopped being such a delinquent. I started working. My family opened a fast food restaurant, so I worked for them. And I started renting my own place in a suburb not too far from where I am now. But that's kind of where everything really went south.
Yeah, it's interesting how for one, I want to talk about the fact that, you found a place to live where the behaviour was accepted. But do you talk with your parents about this now? I mean, to have that kind of boundary, you love your kids so much that the concept of loving detachment is talked about in places like Al-Anon, that even though you love this person so much, the best thing you can do for them is not perpetuate their behaviour and allow them to do that. And at the time for you, I'm sure there must have been a lot of resentment about that at the time for them. It's a huge amount of pain, but it's difficult to see that that's the best at that point. That kind of really is the best and only thing a family can do.
You've hit the nail on the head, Osh. And I say this to parents a lot because, through my public speaking and my book, a lot of parents who have kids who are doing exactly what I was doing, are reaching out to me going, what should I do? And what I end up turning around to them and saying is, at some point, you need to stop supporting them the way you do.
Yep.
To continue to support them. Every time that they hit rock bottom, they just rock up on your door, you give them money and a place to sleep and you get them back on their feet and all those things. Unfortunately, you're only enabling that behavior. There comes a point where you're not actually helping them. You're actually doing them a disservice. And not only that, but you're doing yourself a disservice as well. Because there are parents out there pulling their hair out and who are suffering because, their kids are criminals and drug addicts and just are selfish human beings and are quite happy to just take everything from them. And there comes a point where these parents, and I, one of the best things my mum did was say, you know what? No, you go and do your own thing. And she wasn't there right away to pick up the pieces when I made a mess.
It is any parent listening is probably now thinking about what would it take for me to do that for my own kid. The doctor that really saved me, Zac, I've had him on the show. Ian Chung is his name, Dr. Ian Chung. And he's the first person that talked to me about loving detachment. And he's got some harrowing tales to tell about parents who have brought their kid back, get them back on their feet, give them a couple $100 or whatever, and the 6 weeks later, boom, they're gone, and they don't see him for 3 months, 4 months, and then they show up again. And they've got the third or fourth time that happens, giving them that money, and then that's enough money to overdose, and then they've lost their child.
100%.
And because to get to that leap of, even though every one of your parental reactions is, I must protect them.
Love and support, yeah.
Love and support no matter what, unconditionally. Understanding that addiction, like coronavirus, affects you invisibly. And those behaviors, those protection and enabling behaviors, is the tendrils of that addiction making its way into your behavior, affecting you, infecting the way you see the world. And because that's a great line. How can you tell when an addict is lying? Their lips are moving.
Their lips are moving.
But it's true, because the addiction, the number one symptom of addiction is two really. Is one, is to convince yourself that you're not an addict, but two, also to protect itself. And by moving into that bedsit, but moving into that, boarding with this lady, I'm just living in a house. It just happens to be a house where there's always weed and the dealers around. and so it's just always there. And that's the addiction now driving your life, even though you're telling yourself, oh, it's fine, I'm free, I can do whatever I want.
Absolutely.
That's the thing that's leading the way.
100%. You know, it's a good note for any parents who do have kids that are battling drug addiction, that they need to remember that, you know, if their child is in the pit of addiction, and you know, right, a parent knows there's the red flags and everything like that, or you just actually know that they do drugs. When you're talking to your kid, when your kid is telling you what you want to hear, you know, that, oh, I want to change, you know, I just need some money, this and that, all that bullshit, that is not them talking, that is the drug. You know, that person is not themselves.
No, it's another part of them, that the desire and need for the
Instant validation.
I don't want to say the drug or alcohol, because it could be anything. It could be gambling, it could be porn, it could be give me my phone back. It's that need to protect yourself from the pain of having to face the discomfort that just gets so dysregulated. I've been reading all about this amazing book. You're going to dig it. It's called The Molecule of More. It's all about dopamine. Fucking amazing. Talking about the molecule of more. Unbelievable. Written by a doctor. Super well researched. But it just talks about when that dopamine system gets dysregulated, how the behavior then just becomes completely and utterly about searching for that thing as if it were food, water, or shelter.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because if we don't have food, water, or shelter, we'll die. So we search for those things, you know, relentlessly. Thankfully, we've created a modern society where we don't have to search for those things like crazy. But when we were living, you know, on the land, that just drove us, like, no matter what, this is the most important thing. I have to find water today, otherwise I'm going to die. Everything else doesn't matter. This fight, that, whatever, talking with this person, I need to find water. And it becomes that. It becomes this driven survival instinct from when, you know, we walked out of Africa 20,000, 50, 100,000 years ago. It's fucking amazing, man. You'll dig it so much.
It's spot on. When I was in jail, I was doing a lot of counselling, and my counsellor, you know, we did a lot of work talking about what he called my junkie child, my inner junkie child, and it was this hurt young Zac. You know that psychological theory that in all of us is a child.
Yes.
And in a lot of people, it's hurting. So, and mine was completely drug driven. You know, it was on that constant search to detach from reality in the way that I was feeling, and it wasn't until I actually, you know, in the work that we did, it was a matter of driving a car, you know, because of what I went to jail for. I think that's kind of the mental assimilation that he used. But it was letting that junkie child take a back seat, and you know, and just letting him heal.
Yeah. You said you got to a share house. Did you cast your share house like the best reality show of all time?
Yes.
Did you surround yourself with people who would be no problem at all with some, you know, plates in the microwave on a Tuesday night?
Look, I can tell you, you know, from spending my whole life actively seeking out all the negative influences, to then going to jail and being surrounded by negative influences and actively seeking out positive influences. Like, I've never made it easy on myself, but you know, I don't recommend jail to anybody, but it did save my life.
Yeah, wow.
It's an absolutely horrible place. I had some good TV to watch though. The Bachelor, you know.
Well, I'll get to that. Hang on. Tell me, did your share house have a nickname?
Is that my?
You said you moved. Sorry, I might have got the story wrong. You moved out of the Ringwood. You moved to another. Were you by yourself, or did you have flatmates?
Yeah, no. So that was my own rental property. I did have a roommate move in. Yeah. Just to help cover bills and stuff, but he ended up leaving, and so it was all on me.
Wow.
And it became a very toxic environment. I actually moved. I was in a really toxic and abusive relationship at that time, and I moved this girl in. And when I moved her in, I couldn't get her out, and so our relationship deteriorated really badly. There was a lot of alcohol abuse between the two of us, and I was using drugs copiously. I was working like 60 hours a week, and she was kind of just sitting at home, not doing anything. And then, you know, I'd get home and I'd have to clean and I'd have to cook, and I was really burning the candle at both ends. And you know, when things weren't going her way, it became incredibly volatile.
Wow.
And so my mental health deteriorated more and more.
And I guess you're reaching for the things that what were you working as? What was the job?
So at that time I was doing deck building and I was polishing concrete.
Wow. So proper heavy physical work.
Yeah. I come home covered in concrete dust and
you're 20, 21 years old. You can do it. Doesn't mean you should do it forever because it's hard. It's hard work. And that lifestyle is often how many cans of Red Bull in the morning and,
it's a diet of cigarettes, energy drinks and 7-Eleven sausage rolls. That was what I was living on.
And as the relationship is, deteriorating and, escalating and as far as, as you mentioned, it was abusive. I'm sorry that happened to you, mate. You're reaching for your coping mechanisms or you're down regulating with substances. And that just then puts, a Bunsen burner to the magnesium, doesn't it?
It does. It just got worse and worse and worse. And, again, mum trying to be the supportive mother that she was, she managed to help me get this girl out of the house and then I let her back in.
Addiction's not just drugs, man.
No, it's not. It's, there's, it's like in that movie, Get Into the Greek, that chick's Mr. Aldous Snow, there's nothing you can't turn into heroin.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Rusty's got it. Rusty's a bit... I've had to kind of distance myself a bit from Rusty lately, mate. Rusty was a big hero of mine for quite a while there, and then I'm like, I can't come with you, mate. I was with you with all the sobriety stuff, and I was there, but this whole other thing, I'm just going to have to leave you on your own there. Thanks and goodbye. I'll see you eventually. But he's not wrong about a lot of stuff before that. And he's right there, man. I used to listen to his radio show like 2006. I used to listen to his radio show. I download off the internet. But yeah, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. There's nothing you can't turn into heroin. It's the what can you shove between you and the uncomfortable feeling? Could be anything.
Absolutely.
Can be anything. What are you not facing and how big is it going to have to get? Because eventually that thing just gets so big you can't hold it back. Or the thing you're trying to shove between you and it gets so big it will fucking kill you, which we know, we like to call rock bottom. So you're 21 years old and you've got a driver's license and you've got a car and you've got some mates who need to get from here to there. Was it your car?
It was my car.
What are we talking? Which kind of vehicle?
It was a V6 Ford Escape, so it was a big four-wheel drive.
Right. Yeah. And what was happening on the night? Were you at your house? Is it a kick-on? What was going on?
So I had a really bad day at work. My boss absolutely chewed me out because I was rushing. We were just finishing this deck, and I was kind of rushing, and I messed up the screw line on this deck, and so it was all over the shop. And while it wasn't a massive problem, that just meant we had to come back on Monday to pull up this piece of decking and put it back down and then go. And so he did. He chewed me out about it. And, at that time, I really didn't take criticism well. I just had a habit of self-destructing and beating myself up. That was just what I did. So I got home and I got straight on the bongs and I started drinking. I got a call from my friend and he said to me, we've got a spare ticket to the Alex Williamson comedy show. One of my favorite comedians. Love the guy. And so I did. I said, yeah, 100%. Let's go. And that's the funny thing. Like, when I say mates, I tend to use, quotation marks because I was surrounded by a bunch of people who were just using me up. I had a house, I had a car and a license. I always had drugs and alcohol and, I was always more than happy to kind of share.
We put things around ourselves to make sure that we're enabled when we call it other things, but yeah, it starts to drive all of our choices, all of our decisions. Yeah. There's so many people that I haven't spoken to since the 14th of March, 2010, and they've never texted to ask how I am. I was like, oh, right. Yeah, that was the only reason you're in my life.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I did. We drove to the city and saw the loosest Aussie bloke. And we did, we all had about 5-6 beers each while we were there. Great show.
Did he bring Fleety out? Did he bring Fleety out on stage?
No, so this is back in 2017.
All right.
So it was just him, and his fantastic vulgar humor that we all know and love.
It's a big night. Like, it's a pretty raucous night. Like, if you've never seen Alex Williamson, it's about the absolute upper limits of what you could probably do and say in a public sphere. And so I can imagine the room, this packed room, and just the permission of being in that room of hundreds of people all laughing at this really wrong kind of bent stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of gives you permission to, like, it kind of opens the floodgates of, like,
100%.
Behavior that is otherwise completely off limits is okay. And I can understand how that, not saying that Alex was
not
the reason of anything. No, but I can just get what kind of headspace you're in.
Anyway, from there, it was a great night. And then we started driving back to mine, and in the car, we were already talking about how far we were going to push this night. Let's get absolutely smashed. Let's get home and just get after it. So before we even arrived home, we'd really made this decision that we were going to get fucked up beyond all recognition. And so we did. We got home, and my girlfriend, for the first night in what seemed like months, wasn't home. She wasn't there. And so I had a night away from all that aggression and all that drama. And so that really, in my mind, I was like, oh, wow, I can really have a good night tonight. There's not going to be any screaming. There's not going to be any windows broken. There's not going to be fights and violence. It was like, awesome. So, but we got home, and 3 of my girlfriend's friends were actually already at my house. They kind of came and go as they pleased. And so they were already out in my backyard drinking. And, at that time I didn't really mind. So anyway, me and my 2 friends, we joined them, and we all started drinking and smoking bongs. And very quickly, the music's blaring, the fire's going, drinking beers progressed to drinking shots, smoking joints progressed to doing bongs and just thumb packing cones. And then very quickly that just escalated further into, instead of just drinking shots, we were sculling vodka straight from the bottle. And me and one of my friends literally took turns. We cracked open a bottle of Absolute vodka and stood there and took turns sculling it until it was empty.
That can kill you.
Yeah. And so we realized at that point we were out of alcohol. And my friend said to me, all-night bottle shop. There's an all-night bottle shop, like an hour's drive from my house. It's in the city.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Let's go. An hour.
Yeah.
Round trip, 2 hours.
And unfortunately, that wasn't the first time that I'd done that drive.
Yeah. In that state?
Yeah, look, not in that state, but certainly in a state that I shouldn't be behind the wheel. So, without a second thought, I grabbed my keys and we went to the car. And, I'm talking about 30 seconds to a minute between finishing that bottle of vodka and now I'm in my car. And I'm already too drunk to drive. I'm already too pissed to operate that vehicle with any semblance of responsibility or safety or control. But all that vodka hasn't even really hit my system yet. Yeah. So I turned the car over, passenger jumps in, I'm about to reverse out of the driveway, and all of a sudden these 3 girls, they jump in the back, they wanted to come with. So now my car is loaded, there's 5 people in my car. I reversed out of my driveway and actually backed into a car that was parked across the street. Like, that wasn't enough of an indication that I should not be behind that wheel. And, I'm ashamed to say that everyone in the car kind of shared a look at each other and laughed, and I drove off. And then from, I turned onto the highway, and, it was like getting hit by a wall of alcohol. I couldn't see straight. I had no sense of direction. I couldn't drive in a straight line.
I'm surprised you can remember it.
Look, well, there's flashes, but I definitely remember that onset of not knowing where the fuck I'm going, not knowing, like, really what I'm doing, not being able to drive in a straight line, can't control my speed. That feeling when you're really drunk and your vision is spinning. You get that spinning feeling.
I know exactly what you're saying. So, like, you're oversteering and correcting the wheel, or like that sort of thing.
And like I said, I've driven to this place many a time, but I had no sense of direction. So my friend pulled up his phone, and was looking up Google Maps, how to get there. He was too drunk to see his phone. We were missing turns and whatever. And, we probably didn't make it 10 minutes because I looked down at his phone for a split second. And when I looked back up, man, we were flying towards a brick wall.
Flying like in the air?
Like we weren't on the ground.
Do you know how fast you were going?
Look, I don't. The official police report said that I was traveling. So the mathematician who came out and calculated the debris field and all of that said that I was going 74 kilometers an hour. But they said, because I drove off the side of an embankment and there was no sign of braking towards that embankment, and then I was airborne and I hit this brick wall airborne. The car rolled through this brick wall into the car park of a retirement village. No cars were damaged somehow, but my car landed upside down, and I came to in this car, and like I had no idea what had just happened. Like my first thought was, why am I in my car? And I don't know if it was shock or because I was so drunk, but it really took me about, what felt like 5-10 minutes to understand that I was in a car crash.
Was there any noise in the car? Were there other people in the car making any noise?
The back seat was totally quiet. It took me a minute to really understand that there were other people in my car. Because I'm looking at my steering wheel, and my hands are all cut up, and the windscreen's shattered, and the front of my car's all messed up. And then I realized that the car's pretty much on its side/roof. It's really mangled. Then I start hearing panic voices around the car, and I hear my passenger's voice, and I don't know if it was me or him, but he was not speaking coherently. It was just incoherent rambling. You know what I mean? And I remember thinking that's really weird. And, I kind of tried to get out of my window to really see what was going on, and my foot's stuck. But, my front seat passenger, his body isn't in the car. Like he's kind of on the roof. I'm looking at his seat, and he's kind of leaning down onto me, and he's really bleeding. And I can't get out. So I kind of get back in my seat a little bit.
Did people have seatbelts on, Zac?
Yeah, I don't know how, but everyone was wearing a seatbelt that night.
That's incredible.
And I never wore a seatbelt. And
really,
for some reason, yeah. Do you know what's even weirder is, on a little side note, when I got home that day, I had 4 bags of cement and my tools and all my offcuts of timber in the back of my car. And for some reason, no reason whatsoever, when I got home, I took all of that out. All those bags of concrete, my toolbox, all these offcuts of timber that would have otherwise been flying around my car when I crashed.
Yeah, it would have been all over, mate. It would have been absolutely all over.
I still don't know why I did that. And it's interesting, I've never actually brought that up, but
yeah,
in my head I was like, why did I take all that concrete out of my car? I'd never do that.
I know someone who's been in a similar accident, and everyone would have been fine except for the person who was sitting in the middle of the back seat, wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and it was their body flying around the inside of the car that hurt everybody.
Wow.
It was nothing else. The car was airplanes deployed, everything. The thing rolled over a bunch of times, but it was 80 kilograms of human flying around that broke everything and, smashed everybody and broke bits and pieces. But it's unbelievable that you all had seatbelts on and all that stuff was out of the car, because that's like, each bag of concrete's 20 kilos, 74 k's an hour, 20 kilos. That's going to forget it.
Yeah. It's over. And the car
a Coke can, by the way. If you've got a Coke can, a full Coke can lying around the floor of your car, that will fucking kill you. A tissue box will fuck you up. All right. Yeah. Don't think it's fine with your doily on the back seat. No, a tissue box, if you hit something at 100 k's an hour, a tissue box hitting you in the back of the head at 100 k's an hour will kill you. Don't think it won't. So hang on. So your mates on the roof, it must have been so disorienting. So like, why are the cars sideways? Like, why is the building looking weird?
It's like kind of up against the wall in the photos of my crash. It's like half up against the wall, and the roof's like peeled open a little bit.
Oh.
But so my foot's trapped underneath one of the pedals, and his body is trapped. His leg is pinned by the car. Kind of the front left quarter of the car had kind of collapsed on him. And then next second we're like, so there's all these panic voices around, and then the next second we're getting blasted by a fire extinguisher, and I didn't know why, and it's not until later that I found out that the car was on fire, and by some just miracle, there was a guy driving past who had a fire extinguisher in his car, and he jumped out and he put that fire out.
How'd you guys get out?
So I mean, the SES came. They got me out, laid me down on some grass, and I was actually 2 meters away from one of the girls in the back seat. She was laying down on the grass as well. I don't know if she was moving at that point. And I had this moment when I was growing up. There was this TV commercial, this TAC commercial, where this guy got in the car drunk with his girlfriend, and he crashed, and they lay him on the side of the road next to her dead body, and he cries out, "What have I done?" And that literally came to my head. It was like I was in that exact scene. It was so vivid, and I remember thinking what the fuck have I done? And I was just, I wasn't religious at that point, and I started praying. I really did. I started praying. Please don't let any of them die. Take me instead, all that kind of stuff. And then I was loaded into the back of an ambulance, and I don't know if they gave me something or I passed out, but then I woke up in the hospital, and I was naked as the day I was born on this hospital bed, people running all around me. And, I'm trying to, everyone's moving around really fast, and I'm trying to grab people and ask them, where are my passengers? What's going on? Are my passengers all right? And these nurses and doctors, they have no idea. All they know is that the person on that hospital bed is a drink driver and he was in a really bad crash. So, understandably, they had very little time or patience for me. They were doing their tests and checking up on me and providing me with the necessary amount of care. But there was definitely this air of resentment, because I'm pretty sure they'd be sick of dealing with people like me.
Did the other 4 people end up in the same hospital?
One did, but I didn't find that out till the next day. So I spent that whole night just in absolute fear for their well-being, and I was just terrified. My mum actually came that night during the crash because the police rocked up at her house and said, "Look, he's alive, but he's been in a really bad crash. He's at St. Vincent's Hospital." And so she came, and I'm on this stretcher completely naked. My face is all torn up from the windscreen, and I start crying and saying I'm sorry, and then I tell her that I'm going to be sick. And mother's intuition, but she grabbed this nearby wheelie bin and pulled it in front of me, and I just vomited pure alcohol, and it cleared the room. It was horrible. But then the next day, I woke up, and they told me that I mainly had just superficial scratches on my face. But they told me that one of the girls in the back seat. First, they told me everyone was alive, but they told me one of the girls was at the same hospital as me. They told me that she had a fractured vertebrae, and that she could have very well been paralyzed. I was very lucky, so I went and saw her. She was on the floor above me. I click the elevator button. The elevator door opens, and I get in to the elevator, and there's this distraught mother and father just standing in there, and I thought, this can't be what I think it is. And they see my face, and the first thing they say, "Are you Zac?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am. Is this your daughter?" And they said yes. And what do you say? And so I just I said, guys, I'm so sorry. You know, I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm so sorry. And and they probably didn't know what to say either. And they just said, look, everyone's alive. We're just happy everyone's alive. And so
That could have gone in a bunch of ways, man.
it could have, yeah. And the dad was a big dude. Dad was a very big dude. And so let me tell you, that was one floor in the elevator, but that was the longest elevator ride of my life. And so, they went in and saw their daughter, and I stood outside and waited, and then, they walked out and they said, look, you can go and talk to her. And as soon as I turned the corner, she's in a back brace and a neck brace, this beautiful young girl. And I just burst into tears. Like, I started crying, and, and I say in my presentation that the second you get behind the wheel drunk, there's no, I never meant for this to happen. When it goes bad, there's no saying I never meant for this to happen. There's no I'm sorry. There's no apologies. If you get behind the wheel drunk, or you drive recklessly, like, whether or not you meant it to happen, it was a possibility that you took on. And so there's no other blame but blaming yourself. And so anyway, I see this girl, this beautiful young girl, and I just, I burst into tears, and I'm telling her I'm sorry. And she's like, look, it's okay. I got in the car with you. I knew you were drunk and all that kind of stuff. But, I really hated myself for what I'd done.
Yeah.
I really, really hated myself. And, and being the drug addict that I was, in the weeks after the crash, I just really descended into this really dark hole. I fucking hated myself. I couldn't stand to look at myself. I actually, after a few days after I got out of hospital, because I discharged myself that day, I was like, nah, because they told me like it was just scratches on my face and whatever, and I was like, look, I don't even deserve to be here, and I discharged myself, and I went home, and a couple of days after the crash, the swelling on my face went down, and there was a lot of glass in my face, a lot of glass, and so rather than go back to the hospital, looking back, it was self-harm, but I, with tweezers and a razor blade, I'd cut and pull all of that glass out of my face. And that's why up here, and I don't know if you can see it, but see the side of my nose there, that scar. So that had a big piece of glass that went in it that way. And yeah, so all there and all down this side of my arm was all covered in glass. And so I took it upon myself to get all that out. But I started using a copious amount of ice. I did, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I did. I started using needles. I was drinking every day. I was smoking bongs every day. Doing everything just shy of heroin. I'd never touched heroin because it always scared the hell out of me. But I was a junkie after that.
At what point do you get told from the police, mate, you expect to hear from us again?
Australia Day 2018. I get a call from Forest Hill Police Station. Senior Sergeant calls me and says, look, Zach, we need to have a chat. And so my crash was the 7th of December, 2017. And so, February 2018, Zach, you need to come in. We need to have a chat. So I did. I went, and they weren't very happy with me, understandably. They charged me with 4 counts of reckless conduct endangering life, which I will say each one of those sentences carries a maximum sentence of 10 years. They charged me with 4 counts of negligently causing serious injury. Each one of those has a maximum sentence of 10 years. 4 counts, my license was suspended at the time. I didn't even know, but it was. 4 counts of driving while suspended. They charged me, every charge was times 4 for all the people in my car. I left with something like 28 charges, and they were really, really serious charges. And so I knew I was fucked. I knew I was going to jail. There was nothing I could do about it. And the rapper 360 says in one of his songs, you'd think having a near-death experience would make a smart person take their life more serious. And it's it's messed up because it's so true, but I didn't take my life more serious. I was on bail for 18 months before I was actually put behind bars. And that time, it was as if I was just on death row. There was nothing that I could do between now and my court date that was going to change the outcome. And I deserved to go to jail for what I did. I even back then I believed I deserved to go to jail. But that was terrifying. That was a terrifying thought. And so I did. I just did drugs, and I stayed with this abusive girl for far too long. I did finally get away from her. The house was trashed. I was told that my landlords would not be renewing the lease. No surprises there. Didn't get my bond back. All the furniture and stuff that my mum had given me, she gave me couches and all these really nice, appliances. I ended up putting them all out on hard rubbish and finding a place in Ringwood, just moving into some guy's spare bedroom. And I took pretty much everything that fit in one room I took, and everything else I left for hard rubbish. And I didn't tell her where I moved. And that was the only way that I got away from her.
Right.
That was pretty much the only good thing I did before I went to jail.
How do you know the day that you're going to go, and what happens? Do you have to show up yourself? Does someone come and take you?
So when you leave the police station, they give you a brief of evidence, or not really, so like a charge sheet. And on that charge sheet has the date that you have to appear before a judge. And there were a few little hearings beforehand. There was a committal hearing and stuff like that. And then there's another one where you enter your plea. And that was when I pled guilty. That was at the county court, and that was when I was remanded into custody. That was when my jail sentence really started.